Brighton in 1990. I was actually on my way to the Isle of Wight, but I got offered a job in a pub. Then just potted around doing little bar jobs and things. Boot sales started becoming very big at the time, so I started doing boot sales to earn a living. Had a shop across the road for about a year. That was sold. Then next door came up, and I was there for a year. This one came up. Business was doing really well. We're talking 2001. And so I took this one on as well and had running 2 shops at one time.
We get a general mix here, from students right through. I think my oldest regular's in his 80s, so yeah, all manner of people, from tradesmen, artists. Much like Brighton, it's a melting pot. I've run a few pubs in Brighton. This is the first one that I've owned. The business has been fantastic. You know, it's not an easy business to be in, the pub game, but it's been good to me, so yeah, I can't complain.
I moved into a flat opposite this gym about 4 years ago, and the lady that runs it kept seeing me wheel past in my wheelchair and just invited me in. And I thought, well, this is nice and handy to where I live. I'll start hiring it, start using it to do a bit of balling a couple of times a week just to get my shooting better and get better at playing. And then on the back of that, I ended up starting a new team. A friend of mine came to my house the Christmas before last, and he went, "Oh, do you hear what's going on at that Wuhan market?" And I went, "No, what's that?" And then I jumped onto Twitter and had a look, and it was all about, you know, this virus, this strange virus all over China. I knew it was coming here, we all knew it was coming here, but no one seemed to be taking it very serious at the beginning, did they?
And it's still spreading across a range of countries. The doctors at ground zero and those dealing with victims around the world are coping with an international crisis, crying out for international action.
I think I was probably one of the people as well that didn't really take it that seriously at that point, and just thought it was this virus that would probably be like swine flu or something. It will come and go and not really affect us.
I think the first time we really took notice when the government made this statement that, you know, COVID is here, but it's fairly safe, but don't go to pubs and restaurants.
Yeah, I think the business literally fell off a cliff. It was great one week, terrible the next.
A number of our table officials and referees were going, look, this is, you know, we shouldn't be having this. We shouldn't have all these people travelling to this match. And so we pulled the plug on the Friday night training on Friday the 13th of March. And then on Saturday the 14th of March, we cancelled that match.
It happened very, very quickly. There was no time to ease down. So the stock you had, we ended up giving away to staff, friends, family, and dropping off to the homeless. We wasted around £6,000-7,000 worth of stock.
It was the approach to Easter, which is one of the biggest periods that you know, in the tourism industry. So we were very worried about the loss of the Easter trade. We were probably working on a 2 or 3 month scenario, and I suppose people were thinking it was a little bit of a holiday at the beginning, but I think that feeling soon went.
We then started to talk about PPE, which was, you know, now a phrase that everybody knows, but at that stage it was just known to us in the healthcare environment. And at that stage I started to think, if we've got to wear PPE, then this is getting to the stage where this is getting unsafe for our staff members and for the patients attending. And that's when we took it a little bit more into our own hands and said, look, we need to shut.
We had people in the night they made the announcement that we had to close, you know, and I was in here, we put it on the TV in here, and then basically said, drink up and leave.
That was a shock. When the pubs closed, it was like some people were like, oh, it's just a flu. Some people were like super scathing about its severity, and then other people were way over the top about how bad it could be. They were like, oh, it's going to be like 10% mortality rate, this and that.
Some people saying it's great, shut the whole world down. Or some people saying this is ridiculous. I mean, I know 2 or 3 people around this neck of the world don't even believe in COVID.
We were suddenly having 2 to 3 burials a week that were people who had died from COVID. The ones coming to here were from the care homes. We were allowing burials to take place. So we would open the gates for the people to come in and then lock them once everyone was here. The service would take place, And then we were finding people were having wakes really in the car park and shouting across the car park because they had nowhere to go. I was shouted at, sworn at. People wanted to come and lay flowers because they were various anniversaries. Some people were happy to give us the flowers which we were laying on their plots. And other people were shouting and screaming at us and just going under all of the signs saying, please don't enter.
I took the first lockdown really, really seriously and wasn't going out a great deal at all.
And I remember it was a really, really warm spring as well. So it was like, people were still out and about, but it was like, for the first time, people were like moving really far away from each other when they were walking down the street.
You know, I thought it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks of a lockdown. No matches, no training, no games, you know, short, sharp shock, get the testing system up and running. I thought you'd be laughing.
The first one, it felt like camaraderie, you know, we're all in it together, we're banging pots out of windows, everyone's started a WhatsApp group and, you know, everyone's helping each other and sharing jigsaw puzzles, whatever it is, you know.
I think it's when people started to really appreciate company, because they only had their own company or the company that they have within their own home. And yeah, we started to see lots of people talking over fences, chatting a bit more than they usually would.
I think there was a narrative held collectively by society of we're in this together, which of course we've all heard, but that was also being, not only being espoused by the government, but I think also being held by society. And an example of that would be the clapping for the NHS workers on Thursday. So we all go outside, I think it was at 8 o'clock, and people would clap. So I looked at this and I thought, this is interesting, you know, what's going on here? There's something in this about a communal sense of underlying helplessness, and as long as we follow the rules, and as long as we're all in it together, and as long as we all clap at the same time, then we'll be okay.
From the word go, we were inundated with people offering to foster, adopt. It seemed to be the panic default. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I must get a dog, or I must get a cat. And that, I think, shows the strength of the bond between humans and animals, that in that time of crisis, people wanted to turn to an animal.
When we opened again, we were one of the few bike shops, probably in the southeast, that had a decent stock level. So the first sort of 3 or 4 weeks that we were open was frantic. People were just coming in and going, have you got a bike? Have you got that one? I'll take it, you know, and without really even having a discussion about it.
The business was good at the first week or so, then of course it just towed off to literally just the odd specks of people. This is where you're doing your £30 a day if you're lucky type thing.
We're so used to the visitors, aren't we? We're so used to the tourists. It's the essence of the city. So the city's been very quiet, and it's missing its heart, it's missing its spirit.
A lot of heart and soul groups run in Unitarian churches around the country, and it's a format of prayer, sharing, silent reflection, and then it just felt really important to continue that online, on Zoom. And Zoom has been, you know, a miracle, an absolute miracle, and a lifesaver for so many people. But for churches, it has been incredible. So it's kept us really close. And paradoxically, in many ways, many of us have said we would have a service here, we'd go for coffee and sit with the same people. We'd have Zoom service, and then we'd be put into groups for coffee. So you'd go into your kitchen and make your cup of coffee, come back, and then you'd find yourself in a Zoom room with random people that you might not have talked to before. So we were forced to get out of our comfort zone, and so became quite intimate. It was quite extraordinary, and we all felt this very strongly.
Most people didn't turn on their cameras like into the students, and that was a bit like, I don't know, the teachers always get annoyed about us not turning on our cameras because it's like a bit impersonal. But then again, it's like a bit awkward. Yeah. If everyone else has got it off and you're just like the only one, it's a bit awkward.
Now, the one thing I'm not happy about is that I still have to pay £9 every year to have an online course when I can literally go on YouTube and look up like Yale or something, history degree, and have all of their lectures there just in front for free.
I've been doing delivery about, I don't know, 2 months, 2 years maybe. Uber, I kept meaning to get onto it, and we had so much trouble doing the menus and everything. So we eventually got onto that.
I was trying to look for a job before the COVID pandemic started, and then when the pandemic started, it was like, oh, that's it. Like nothing, no one's hiring. At least not young people aren't getting hired really. I was on the double. Yeah, I was getting the universal credit. Thank you, government. That was very good.
Some of my staff, like those, didn't get furlough because they hadn't been working here long enough to get the furlough money. Unfortunately, so we paid them, and I tried to look after them anyway. Paid them over the top of what the furlough was because they got to live. I did get the relief like everybody else, which enabled me to pay off all my outstanding bills, trading bills. Not that there was loads, but I paid off every that I owed money to regarding rents and rates and everything, because we got that grant, and I wanted to know that if it got worse, I wasn't going to have people tapping me on the shoulder.
The 80% furlough was good. The stopping of business rates helped. It doesn't, of course, mean anything to the money you've lost, because your takings are gone.
I'm a leaseholder here, so I do rent it off a brewery. So yeah, they've done what they can. I think it was a rent holiday, which basically means you still owe us the rent at some point. So not knowing when that would be or how my business would look then, I was then looking ahead to see. I was more worried about what my debt would be when I'd open. In my mind, it would be like maybe a couple of months I'll reopen, and then who knows? I could be have that much debt that my business is no longer feasible anyway.
People did feel that they missed being in this sacred space. So we opened the doors so that local people can come in and sit with us. We sit in a circle with the candle, just to re-inhabit the space. It felt that Zoom was fine, we were connecting, but there was a sense in which we wanted to allow people to come back safely, gradually, before we could all come back as a congregation. So that's been quite nice to do.
Before they'd have like these gatherings or like socials where you go out and go to the pub or something or whatever, have like some sort of game night or a movie night or something, which are pretty good. Even though they seem a bit corny, they're good to make mates there because you're all in the same boat. But they tried to do the same thing but online, and it just doesn't work. It just really doesn't work. I mean, however much we think we're in like a super digital age, there's still nothing like, there's still a necessity for like one-to-one human interaction.
The big thing that has really stopped throughout all of this, we used to have a monthly bereavement group, which started off with about 10 people and could be as much as 30. People would attend for 2 hours once a month, and they would talk about anything and everything, and it was a really good way of just knowing that everyone in the group had gone through a similar situation and they just felt at ease, and that has been really, really hard not being able to host that, knowing that the people really are missing it. We do see some of them sat up on the decking with flasks of tea that they've brought, with a couple of them will just meet up because they've made strong friendships and they miss each other. And they'll just have a cup of tea and go and see their loved ones.
We've got a group chat that we chat on. It sort of went a little bit quiet, and we're doing weekly Zoom calls, which people can just drop in and out of. And we don't usually talk about basketball. Sometimes we'll talk about vaccines, or sometimes we'll talk about cars, or anything else really that comes along. But there's no set pattern to it. People can just log on a Friday night, enter the room, and we're just on Zoom having a natter. I remember when I was first injured, and I didn't go out very much when I was first injured. And so it almost felt like going back to that time of being stuck indoors. A number of the players that we've got who have been in a wheelchair a long time have maybe handled it better than the people who are newly injured or newly disabled.
When we opened up, the first thing I allowed people to do was to eat outside. But again, tables had to be distanced. And as you know, we had quite a good summer weather-wise. It's really good.
That was like a celebratory atmosphere in Brighton, I think. There was a lot of people like, oh, it's over, because our cases were way down compared to like London and places. We were doing well.
We did see like a huge influx of people coming in. Obviously, we were taking precautions, doing things the way we should, and yeah, we saw popularity just go straight back up again. We were back working. It was all really fun and everything, albeit that we had to do things in a certain way. And the summer was fun.
It's just a relief for people to get out. And we have parasols and we have more tables put out all out there. So I think there's a nice feel about it. Obviously you had that distancing thing, making sure the menus were clean and doing the old sanitising the chairs and the tables. So we did all of those things.
We had a safe environment. I'm sure, you know, when you're at home, you don't spray your table every time you stand up from it and walk away. We do here. We do in restaurants. We do in bars, we do in pubs.
So many pubs, and I think rightly so, they've found workarounds. So they'd offer like chips or something as a meal for like £1, and then you could get a pint. I remember that. I remember at Wetherspoons, and we literally just bought like a portion of fries, which cost like £1.50 or something like that, and then just bought a bunch of drinks.
Supply chain really stopped during the first lockdown, and an awful lot of the bike shops that did remain open sort of sold out of all of their stock. I kind of feel like I've had the same conversation with people hundreds and hundreds of times, in as far as we've got them on order, they should be here soon. I'm not going to take a deposit off you because I can't guarantee when it's going to turn up. Yeah. But you know, and that's been frustrating, because I think in some ways if we'd had the increased interest in cycling that we've seen and the stock to supply that, then I could say we've been having a brilliant time. But you know, since last June until pretty much now, we haven't had bikes.
Trading was terrible. All we could do was some takeaway food. We were in a situation where we still lost money each week.
It costs us, you know, in the region of £1 million a year to maintain the substructure of the pier. So we've had maintenance ongoing on the pier throughout the lockdown period, because it's not something we can stop. You had to negotiate on rent. Landlords want their money. You haven't got any income to pay. So it was a very difficult and has remained a very difficult position for lots of people.
There's a lot of B&Bs around here. They're all reporting no trade at all. You know, they get the annual conferences and that fills them up. There was none of that at all. Of course, Pride never happened, which is a huge event on this street.
I had to destroy all my beer that I had in stock. That in itself is a big job. People didn't really see, you know, it's simple to say, I'll just tip your beer away, but you see how long it takes you to tip a pint away. An 11-gallon barrel has got 88 pints in it. And I had basically it took me 12 hours solidly to pour my beer away.
So it's the highs and lows. I think that's the struggle. Playing wheelchair basketball for me, that's the fun part of all the other stuff I do, is actually playing in those games. And what COVID's done is it's taken away the one fun part of my life and left me with all the paperwork still, left me with all the work to do, left me with all the running around to do, but I don't get to play a match at the end of it. So it's been tough, yeah.
We have managed to worship together at home on Zoom, but we haven't managed to sing together. It's that being together in fellowship and worshipping and singing together and praying together in situ. We have missed it, and I think that's why I wanted to start the silent prayer, but you know, that's not it, is it? It's not. And so Pamela comes in and plays, and then occasionally I sing a little bit, but it's not the same as the congregation being together. So I guess that's what I'm feeling here, I'm feeling the, you know, that loss, and it is a loss and it is grief, yeah.
Funeral directors weren't always telling us that somebody had passed away from COVID. It's only through talking to the family if they wish to tell us. We don't push. They weren't allowed to touch the coffins. They could obviously throw flowers on, but some people like to touch the coffin before. They weren't allowed to do that at all. I can't imagine my mum, if my dad had passed away then, not being able to touch her and give her a hug or hold her hand. I think it must have been horrendous.
In the summer, you had a few of the pubs and bars turn into off licences. So people were taking beers to the beach, etc. Under the second lockdown, as you can see behind me, everything is closed.
There was a more generalised anxiety, a more weariness, a sense of exhaustion of how long is this going to go on for? What's it all going to mean? Do we have to wear face masks? How long are we going to have to wear face masks for? All these questions are implying an underlying sense of, actually, now I don't feel in control anymore.
It felt very apocalyptic because the lecturer would have not only a face mask on but also the visor.
Like half my teachers were like, oh, you must wear a mask whilst you're in class all the time. Then the other ones were like, no, don't worry about it, it's fine, like you don't have to.
To be honest, people weren't really following the rules.
You know, winter approaching, normal levels of flu and illnesses that you get in winter. We always thought there must be a chance that the virus would spring to life again. So were we surprised? No, we were surprised the government was surprised.
I've gone through a roller coaster when it comes to thinking about how the government have handled it. You know, at one point I'm thinking, oh, this is good, and the next thing I'm thinking, oh, this is completely rubbish.
This is brand new to everybody. Nobody could have foreseen what was going to happen, and nobody could foresee how quickly things were changing all the time. That's making no excuses for government. You know, they decided to be in power. They decided that that's the job they wanted, etc., etc. So no excuses for them. But even if you or I were in that position, if you're taking advice from the scientists, and then you've got the pressure of business saying, you close us down, we're going to go bankrupt, and all these people unemployed, the balancing of it, I wouldn't want that job.
All I was doing before was, for the last 5-6 years, is just ticking over anyway. At my age, and I'm almost 60, I don't want to give up doing this and go and work in, well, where the hell can you work? I can become coffee seller, I suppose, to make another coffee shop. Go to work at Morrison's, maybe get a job filling shelves and stuff like that. Do you really want to do? I don't. But there's nothing else out there. I've got no other skills.
As time has progressed, there has been more and more anger. I think the mixed messages has created anger. I think the lack of leadership has created anger. So what do people do with that underlying anger? I think it's ended up getting displaced. So there have been COVID protests. We can see that as a direct manifestation of anger. But there have been other protests that have really turned quite ugly and violent at times that have had nothing to do with COVID. Those protests might still have taken place in a world without COVID, but I do think that COVID has perhaps fueled the division and it's fueled the anger, and then you get quite irrational and polarised behaviour. And again, the nuance, the debate gets lost.
We kind of stayed open then until November for a week, and then we had another close down, and they reopened us for Christmas. It was just appallingly quiet. It was probably the worst Christmas I've ever had.
But then, of course, we got the fiasco over Christmas, where it was going to be 5 days and everyone could go and do what they like, which was cancelled the day before and turned into 1 day, which had huge implications for people who had ordered stock in.
The government was saying, you know, you'll be able to go and hug your mum and your auntie and your granny, and Christmas was going to be okay. And I think we all knew that it wasn't going to be okay. I thought we all had doubts, because everybody I was talking to had doubts that Christmas was going to be on. But the government was telling us that yes it was. And then, bang, it shut the doors on Christmas.
So I know how disappointing this will be. But we have said throughout this pandemic that we must and we will be guided by the science.
Yeah, it was like the day before, because we had a trip booked
we were gonna
go up to Edinburgh, to Scotland, to see my mum's side of the family. And it was like the day before, it was like...
Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon said, like,
no,
we don't want you here.
You're not allowed in.
So we packed all our bags
So that
and
was-
stuff.
that
It
was
was
a
a bit depressing.
I think we had a good Christmas.
Yeah, we
We had
did.
a good Christmas,
I mean, it was a bit weird.
I'd pretty much written it off. I knew I would never make anywhere near the money that I usually make at Christmas time. So Christmas Day, I cooked Christmas dinner and put the open fire on. I got all the pub ready like a pub, and just me and my wife sat here and had Christmas dinner. You know, a lot of people that are very disappointed about Christmas, you know, there is a lot of positives here. At the very worst Christmas possible, I'd get to spend the day with a person that I loved and eat some nice food with them. Doesn't sound that bad, really, does it? You know. So for me, that's what it was for Christmas. It was a lovely Christmas, actually.
Now, obviously, in January we had another lockdown, and there's that we have seen a bit of a tail off through more into February than into January. People were still coming a little bit because medical appointments were available, but people have eased down a little bit through February through a number of reasons, and mainly because the hospitals are very full of COVID.
Winter time has really not helped, and it's been a lot bleaker for a lot of people.
The cases were crazy at that point. I remember the cases were so high and the deaths were so high, and it was like, okay, this is really properly serious now. When it gets that cold and it gets dark at like 4 p.m, it's so depressing to be outside in the cold.
Yeah.
Like, so like I saw my mates a lot less, I think, during the winter lockdown.
Since December, we've done nothing. I think people get fatigued with it. It was a lot of mixed messages in the beginning. Do this, don't do that, go here, don't do this. And I think people kind of just found their own way of dealing with it, didn't they?
Strangely, I kind of look back to the first one with a sense of like rose-tinted glasses, and wasn't a world a wonderful place when we all loved each other, sort of thing.
It felt like we were back to square one, essentially, although we did have the vaccine to look forward to at that point.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there was at least some sort of end in sight, yeah.
A lot of the people that we deal with are obviously older, and a lot of them have had their jabs, their vaccines.
Yep, I've had the first vaccine, had it in February. No side effects at all, no, it's been really good, really positive.
I had the Oxford, which obviously is in the press at the moment that Europe doesn't like it, but as you can see, I'm here, I'm quite well, no side effects.
My mum got hers really early. She was because she works charity work for a medical company, so she got hers really early. So I got that phone call and I was like, yes, Mum.
For the most part, I haven't seen any of my family for nearly a year now.
My dad's still yet to meet his first grandson.
Yesterday was incredibly busy. So, you know, because we're outside, people don't seem so concerned. They get out of their cars, they've got nothing really to touch other than their flowers. They, you know, say a few words, reflect, and then they go home.
What has happened with COVID is it's thrust death back into the public eye, and we don't know what to do with it. How do we have a conversation about death? How do we live in the face of death?
It was very, very scary at first. People felt very vulnerable and didn't want to go out. So we felt that the need to hold each other in sort of hope and support. So that's what we've been trying to do. And it's been hard, really. Mm.
The other thing that COVID has done is throw the whole concept of our culture. How do we live? What do we do? What are the rules up in the air? It's not safe for me to go out, and it's not safe for me to be around other people. It's not safe for me to have human contact, and people who don't wear masks are granny killers.
I remember seeing some graffiti saying, what did it say again? It was like 5G will kill or something like that in Brighton. People were worried about it. Even my mum's friends, like sort of hippie types, especially hippie types that were super wary about the 5G.
It's atrocious, the worst any of us have ever seen. For those people who think this is not a serious illness,
they need to take a good look. This is as scary as it gets.
The approach that has been taken in this country has been one of instilling fear in people. And whilst that might be effective, what it does is it disempowers people. Because if you're pushing a fear narrative, essentially what you're saying is that we don't really trust you to take a common sense approach, so we're going to scare the life out of you so that you comply. It's effective, but then you have a problem, because once you've pushed people into a fear position, how do you get them back to feeling safe? How do you get them back to actually being able to think about, okay, do I feel safe enough to go out? Do I feel safe enough to take off my mask? Do I feel safe enough to send my kids back to school? All those sorts of questions.
In August, around August, September, October, that sort of time, there were a few ladies in their early 50s, late 40s, who had not had cancer treatment because of the shutdown, and their health had deteriorated and it was noticeable because they had teenage children, and that was sad.
What I do think is starting to emerge now is a narrative around, maybe there are other costs that we hadn't thought about that have come about as a result of the policies we implemented with COVID that we didn't think about. I mean, child mental health problems are off the scale at the moment. In a positive way, COVID might well have put people a little bit more in touch with, how do I authentically own what gives me a sense of purpose and meaning? How do I become the person that maybe on some level I've always wanted to be but never dared to be?
I do stuff I enjoy. I enjoy movies, I enjoy music, I enjoy comic books. This is why I sell comic books. That way you get the people in who enjoy doing what you enjoy doing.
We've always had this vision of building a bespoke stadium in the city and running a huge number of community outlets from it. Slowly, very slowly, those boxes are being ticked.
I'm very positive for Brighton. I think it's a very understanding, inclusive society, and I think we all try and help each other as much as we can. We have big open spaces, lots of parks. We live on a beach, with a lot of open recreational space. There will be changes. I don't think we'll go back to exactly what we were. There will be things we've learnt from the pandemic. There'll be things that we've learnt that are better practice for our staff members that we'll continue to do.
Brighton's a great place to trade. It has its up and downs like anywhere, but it's a great place to trade. It's, you've got a great variety of people. Brighton Council have been very, very good, have to be honest. So we need to get the tourism back, and I'm sure that the Greens with the Conservative and Labour groups will do their best to promote the city as positively as possible, because we need these jobs back.
I honestly don't know if I'm going to have a successful business in the future, if I'm going to be a publican in the future, what I'm going to do. So yeah, I don't have any qualifications to do anything else. But then with that said, I do consider myself very fortunate, and I'm just excited about getting open, getting going, serving my customers, and rebuilding my life.